J.W. Williams Funeral Directors have been proudly serving the people of this community since 1918. Service is our motto. The poor, the rich, the middle class, and all are given the best of care and attention at all times. You have the privilege to select what you want. In your time of need, contact the capable, the competent, and the dependable staff of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home who is genuinely concerned with your care. At J.W. Williams Funeral Home, you are aptly served by the proprietor president, Deacon Arthur L. Parker, who continues the traditions and values set forth by the past president, Dr. Napoleon Williams. Your announcements for the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Sunday morning program are Deacon Arthur L. Parker, Reverend Isaac H. Owens, Mrs. Calandra Wilkerson Parker, Minister Frankie Harmon, Miss Sandra Johnson, and Deacon Earl Clark, Jr.
Thank you, and good morning, friends. We come to you this morning to bring announcements, dedications, and songs. We certainly hope that your day may be brighter after listening to the program. The family of United States Army veteran Mr. Danny Williamson of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Miss Vera Mae Carter of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Sammy Lee Bridges Sr. of Americus, Georgia. The family of United States Army veteran Mrs. Doris Jean Jones McBurst of Pitts, Georgia, would like to thank their many friends for the food, the flowers, the condolences, and all other expressions of sympathy and kindness shown to them during their hours of sorrow and bereavement during the past week. United States Army veteran Mr. Danny Williamson, age 64, of 505 South 14th Street, Cordele, Georgia, died Tuesday, January 17th at Atrium Navison Health in Macon, Georgia. The funeral service with military honors for United States Army veteran Mr. Danny Williamson, age 64, was held Tuesday, January 24th, graveside at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. The Reverend Everline Wallace, pastor of the St. John Baptist Church, officiated. Survivors include his loving and devoted daughter, Miss Rashonda M. Wallace of Hawkinsville, Georgia, his beloved and devoted brothers, Mr. Ernest Williamson and his wife, Mrs. Sarah Williamson, Mr. Jackie Williamson and his wife, Mrs. Valina Williamson, both of Cordele, Georgia, Bishop Lawyer Williamson and his wife, Evangelist Alice Williamson of Tifton, Georgia, and Mr. L.W. Williamson and his wife, Mrs. Fanny Williamson of South Bend, Indiana. A host of beloved nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive United States Army veteran Mr. Danny Williamson, age 64, of 505 South 14th Street, Cordele, Georgia. Miss Vera Mae Carter, age 74, of 416 West 22nd Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Tuesday, January 17th at her residence in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Miss Vera Mae Carter, age 74, was held Wednesday, January 25th, in the sanctuary of the Beulah Land Baptist Church in Cordele, Georgia. Dr. Dwayne Daniels, pastor, her beloved sister, the Reverend Dr. Vileen Carter Ray, officiated. The burial followed at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include her devoted companion, Mr. Kenny Clark of Cordele, Georgia, her loving and devoted sons, Mr. Ernest Bernard Trice and his wife, Mrs. Michelle Trice of San Antonio, Texas, and Mr. Gregory A. Carter and his wife, Mrs. Shaneria Carter of Palm Bay, Florida. 3 beloved grandchildren, her loving and devoted sisters, Mrs. Eleanor Mumphrey and Mrs. Catherine Massey, both of Atlanta, Georgia, Mrs. Dorothea Collins and her husband, Mr. Ralph Collins of Ocilla, Georgia, the Reverend Dr. Vileen Carter Ray and her husband, Mr. Robert Ray of Leesburg, Georgia, and Mrs. Brenda Finn and her husband, Mr. Bobby Finn of Atlanta, Georgia. Her beloved brothers, Mr. Willie Carter of Westbury, New York, Mr. Joseph Carter and his wife, Mrs. Deborah Carter of Gray, Tennessee, and Mr. Roosevelt Carter and his wife, Mrs. Sharon Carter of Atlanta, Georgia. A host of loving nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive Miss Vera Mae Carter, age 74, of 416 West 22nd Avenue, Cordele, Georgia. Mr. Sammy Lee Bridges, Sr., age 80, of 214 Barnum Drive, Americus, Georgia, died Saturday, January 21st, at the Phoebe Sumter Medical Center in Americus, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Sammy Lee Bridges, Sr., age 80, was held Friday, January 27th, in the sanctuary of the Friendship Baptist Church in Americus, Georgia. The pastor, Bishop Melvin McCluster, officiated. His pastor, the Reverend Dr. H.C. Wilson, pastor of the Mount Olive Baptist Church, delivered the eulogy. The burial followed at the Eastview Cemetery in Americus, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife, Mrs. Alice Faye Dotson Bridges of Americus, Georgia. His loving and devoted children, Mr. Sammy Lee Bridges, Jr., and his wife, Mrs. Demetra Bridges, and Mr. Gary Smith, both of Americus, Georgia. Miss Helen Champion of Atlanta, Georgia, Miss Antoinette Hayes and her husband, Mr. Jeremy Hayes of Conyers, Georgia, Mr. David Dotson and his wife, Mrs. Sabrina Dotson of Americus, Georgia, and Mr. Xavier Dotson of Conyers, Georgia. A host of beloved grandchildren, great-grandchildren, his beloved brothers, Mr. James A. Bridges and his wife, Mrs. Viola Bridges, and Mr. Joe Bridges, both of Americus, Georgia. A beloved sister, Mrs. Ozzie Baker, and her husband, Mr. Robert Baker of Preston, Georgia. A host of devoted nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive Mr. Sammy Lee Bridges, Sr., age 80, of 214 Barnum Drive, Americus, Georgia. Mr. Joseph Williams, Jr., age 79, of 316 Porter Street, Vienna, Georgia, died Wednesday, January 18th, at the Houston Medical Center in Warner Robins, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Joseph Williams, Jr., age 79, was held Saturday, January 28th, at the Dooley County Primary School Gymnasium in Pinehurst, Georgia. The Reverend Coley Clark, Jr., pastor of the Zion Grove Baptist Church, officiated. The burial followed at the Vienna City Cemetery in Vienna, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife, Mrs. Mary Williams of Vienna, Georgia. His loving and devoted children, Miss Amber Williams, Miss Katrina Williams Byers, and Miss Melania Williams, all of Warner Robins, Georgia. Miss Stephanie Williams of North Carolina, Mr. Sean Williams of Augusta, Georgia, Miss Rosalind Fields of Albany, Georgia, Miss Javetta Forbes of St. Petersburg, Florida, Miss Barbara Ann Cross of Atlanta, Georgia, and Miss Michelle Williams of Jacksonville, Florida. A host of beloved grandchildren and great-grandchildren, his loving and devoted sister, William of Lilly, Georgia, Miss Bernice Williams Kimbrough of Atlanta, Georgia, Miss Taretha Williams of Lilly, Georgia, and Miss Angela Williams McClendon and her husband, Mr. Andre McClendon of Byram, Georgia. One beloved brother, Mr. Kenneth Williams, and his wife, Mrs. Dora Williams of Elko, Georgia. A host of devoted nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Joseph Williams, Jr., age 79, of 316 Porter Street, Vienna, Georgia. United States Army veteran, Mrs. Doris Jean Jones McBurst, age 66, of 2627 Pierce Road, Pitts, Georgia, died Monday, January 23rd, at her residence in Pitts, Georgia. The funeral service for United States Army veteran Mrs. Doris Jean Jones McBurst, age 66, was held Saturday, January 28th, graveside at the Cedar Hill Cemetery in Bessemer, Alabama. Bishop A.L. White officiated. Survivors include her loving and devoted husband, Mr. Harris McBurst of Pitts, Georgia, her loving and devoted daughter, Miss Latoya Cook, and her husband, Sam Cook of Pitts, Georgia, 2 beloved grandchildren, 4 loving and devoted sisters, Mrs. Dolores Reeves and her husband, Mr. Ernest Reeves, Mrs. Betty Dickens and her husband, Mr. Derek Dickens, Miss Ethel Todd, and Miss Judy Jones, all of Birmingham, Alabama. One beloved brother, Mr. Darrell Jones of Birmingham, Alabama. Her beloved aunts, Mrs. Ida Brown of South Haven, Michigan, Mrs. Mary Mountain of Birmingham, Alabama, and Mrs. Lula Thomas of South Holland, Illinois. Her beloved uncles, Mr. Morgan McMiller and Mr. John McMiller, both of Macon, Mississippi. A host of devoted nieces and nephews, a beloved goddaughter, Miss Olympia Lofton of Pitts, Georgia, her beloved friend, Mrs. Anna Jones, a host of other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survived. United States Army veteran, Mrs. Doris Jean Jones McBurst, age 66, of 2627 Pierce Road, Pitts, Georgia. Again, the family of United States Army veteran Mr. Danny Williamson of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Miss Vera Mae Carter of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Sammy Lee Bridges Sr. of Americus, Georgia. The family of Mr. Joseph Williams Jr. of Vienna, Georgia. The family of United States Army veteran Mrs. Doris Jean Jones McBurst of Pitts, Georgia, would like to thank their many friends for all of the many kindnesses shown to them during their hours of sorrow and bereavement during the past week. May God bless each of you is their prayer. The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors serving Cordele and Vienna were in charge of each of these arrangements during the past week. And now, it is certainly with the deepest regret that we make the following announcements. Deacon Ransom Briggs, age 84, of 350 Hobbs and Bridge Road, Buena Vista, Georgia, died Wednesday, January 18 at Atrium Navison Health in Macon, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted children, Mrs. Gail Ranhamsey and her husband, Mr. Bo Ranhamsey, Miss Pamela Veretta and her husband, Sir Terrence Veretta, and Mr. Kelvin Briggs and his wife, Mrs. Karma Briggs. 4 loving grandchildren, his beloved sister, Mrs. Margaret Briggs Watson, his sisters-in-law, Miss Pearl Briggs, Miss Geneva Rush and her husband, Mr. Henry Rush, and Miss Patricia Freeman, his godson, Mr. Gregory Willis, a host of beloved nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Deacon Ransom Briggs, age 84, of 350 Hobbs and Briggs Road, Buena Vista, Georgia. The funeral service for Deacon Ransom Briggs, age 84, will be held Tuesday, January 31st at 11 a.m. in the sanctuary of the Nazarene Church of God in Christ in Buena Vista, Georgia. The pastor, Elder Larry Franklin, will officiate. The burial will follow at the Hobbs Briggs Family Cemetery in Buena Vista, Georgia. The public visitation will be Monday, January 30th from 1 until 6 p.m. in the sanctuary of the Nazarene Church of God in Christ in Buena Vista, Georgia. Mr. Lonnie Charles Felton, better known as Shine, age 66, of 823 T.E. Mooney Street, Montezuma, Georgia, died Monday, January 23rd at his residence in Montezuma, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted sons, Mr. Travis Hill of Americus, Georgia, and Mr. Jeremy Walker of Vienna, Georgia. 2 beloved grandchildren, Jalen Hill and Takayla Walker, both of Alabama. His beloved and devoted mother, Mrs. Dorothy Felton Leggett of North Carolina. His beloved sisters, Mrs. Betty J. Ratliff and her husband, Mr. Ivy Ratliff of Hawkinsville, Georgia, Miss Mary Paul of Cordell, Georgia, Miss Deborah Hannon of Rochelle, Georgia, and Mrs. Wendy Hamilton Quinn of Centerville, Georgia. His beloved brothers, Mr. Larry Leggett and his wife, Mrs. General Leggett of Warner Robins, Georgia, Mr. Michael Leggett and Mr. Jason Leggett, both of Hawkinsville, Georgia. A host of beloved nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Lonnie Charles Felton, better known as Shine, age 66, of 823 T.E. Mooney Street, Montezuma, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Lonnie Charles Felton, age 66, better known as Shine, will be held Saturday, February 4th at 10 a.m. in the sanctuary of the Turkey Creek Baptist Church in Lilly, Georgia. The burial will follow in the Vienna City Cemetery in Vienna, Georgia. The public visitation will be Friday, February 3rd from 1 until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Mr. Daniel Cornelius Sharper Wood, age 31, of 129 South Dudley Street, Americus, Georgia, died Thursday, January 26, at the St. Francis Hospital in Columbus, Georgia. Survivors include his beloved daughter, Miss Kyler D. Woods of DeSoto, Georgia, his loving mother, Miss Ruthie Gray Sharper, his loving parents, Miss Bobby Woods and Mr. Robert McCoy of Americus, Georgia, his loving godmother, Miss Teresa A. Cooks of Sumter County, Georgia, his beloved sister, Elder Sabrina Sharpner Graham, and her husband, Mr. Lateria Graham of Locust Grove, Georgia, Miss Erica Sharper of Thomasville, Georgia, Miss Rochelle Sharper of Albany, Georgia, and Miss Aretha Woods of Americus, Georgia. A beloved brother, Mr. Henry Woods of Americus, Georgia, a host of other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends, to include a special friend, Mr. Caleb McDonald of DeSoto, Georgia, survived. Mr. Daniel Cornelius Sharper Woods, age 31, of 129 South Dudley Street, Americus, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Daniel Cornelius Sharper Woods, age 31, will be held Sunday, February 5th at 11 a.m. graveside at the Eastview Cemetery in Americus, Georgia. His beloved sister, Elder Sabrina Sharper Graham, will officiate. The public visitation will be held Saturday, February 4th from 1 until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Beloved musician, Brother Dwayne Alexander Sumner, age 45, of 201 South 12th Street, Cordell, Georgia, died Sunday, January 22nd, at the home of his beloved daughter in Newberry, South Carolina. Survivors include his loving and devoted children, Sergeant A. Farini Joshua Williams, and his wife, Mrs. Jasmine Williams of West Wego, Louisiana. LS3 Denise A. Sumner of Norfolk, Virginia. IT2 Jalen A. Sumner of Virginia Beach, Virginia, Miss Jordan A. Sumner of Newberry, South Carolina, Miss Janelle A. Sumner, and Mr. Jackson A. Sumner, and Ms. Joanna A. Sumner, all of Cordele, Georgia. 3 beloved grandchildren, Janae, Jonah, and Carter. His beloved mother, Mrs. Charlie May Sumner. His beloved stepmother, Miss Alma Brown. His beloved sisters, Miss Joa Green of Lakeland, Florida, Miss Tamika Turner, Miss Veronica Moore, both of Atlanta, Georgia. His beloved brothers, Mr. Charles A. Parker Jr. of Live Oak, Florida, Mr. David Cooper Jr. of Atlanta, Georgia, and Mr. Brandon Moore and his wife, Mrs. Tanya Moore of Vienna, Georgia. His beloved grandmothers, Mrs. Willie Bell Sumner of Araby, Georgia, and Mrs. Adele Parker of Ashburn, Georgia. The mother of his children, Miss Tiffany Jackson Sumner of Cordele, Georgia. A host of other relatives and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Beloved musician, Brother Dwayne Alexander Sumner, age 45 of 201 South 12th Street, Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for beloved musician, Brother Dwayne Alexander Sumner, age 45, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. Mr. Calvin B. Johnson Sr., better known as Peanut, age 40, of 1206 East Blue Lane, Cordele, Georgia, died Thursday, January 26, at the Chris Regional Nursing and Rehabilitation Center in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include his beloved and caring children, Miss Shanteria Holmes of Cordele, Georgia, Mr. Calvin B. Johnson Jr., and Mr. Caleb Johnson, both of Albany, Georgia. His beloved father, Mr. Samuel McKenzie of Cordele, Georgia. A beloved brother, Mr. Alvin B. Johnson Sr., and his wife, Mrs. Crystal Johnson of Columbus, Georgia. A loving and devoted aunt, Mrs. Mary Lango Smith of Cordele, Georgia. A beloved cousin, Deacon Terry Lango, and his wife, Mrs. Wanaki Lango of Cordele, Georgia. A host of devoted cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Calvin B. Johnson Sr., better known as Peanut, age 40, of 1206 East Blue Lane, Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Calvin B. Johnson Sr., better known as Peanut, age 40, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. Miss Jacqueline Power, age 58, of 2124 South Highway 41, Cordele, Georgia, died Thursday, January 26, at her residence in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted husband, Mr. Robert C. Dennis of Cordele, Georgia. Her loving and devoted children, Miss Shamika Power, Miss Rebecca Power, both of Florida, Mr. Robert Dennis, 4 beloved grandchildren. Her loving and devoted sisters, Miss Donna Power, Miss Sandra White, and Miss Teresa Bethel, all of South Carolina. A beloved brother, Mr. Julius Power, and Mr. Donnell Power, both of South Carolina, Mr. Ernest Power of New Jersey. Her beloved grandparents, Mr. Harold and Miss Jacqueline Power of South Carolina, a host of beloved nieces and nephews, aunts and uncles, many cousins, other relatives, and many sorrowing friends survive. Miss Jacqueline Power, age 58, of 2124 South Highway 41, Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Miss Jacqueline Power, age 58, will be announced at a later date pending the completion of the arrangements. Mr. Willie James Dawson Jr., age 66, of 2002 South 7th Street, Cordele, Georgia, died Friday, January 27th at the Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife, Mrs. Gwendolyn Walker Dawson of Cordele, Georgia, his loving and devoted children, Mr. Antonio D. Dawson and Miss Olivia V. Dawson, both of Cordele, Georgia. 12 beloved grandchildren, 4 great-grandchildren, his loving and devoted sisters, Mrs. Annie Lee Thomas of Hackensack, New Jersey, Miss Jenny Lee Hampton of Covington, Georgia, Miss Minnie Pearl Holmes and Miss Norma Jean Hicks, both of Cordele, Georgia. His beloved brothers, Mr. David Hutchinson of Dooley County, Georgia, Mr. Roy Lee Dawson, Mr. Ricky Dawson Sr., and Mr. Joe Dennis Dawson, both of Cordele, Georgia. A host of beloved nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Willie James Dawson Jr., age 66, of 2002 South 7th Street, Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Willie James Dawson Jr., age 66, will be announced at a later date pending the completion of the arrangements. The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors serving Cordele and Vienna are in charge of each of these arrangements during this week. Friends, that conclude our funeral notices for this morning, and we do remind you concerning our pre-funeral arrangements planning available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home, with packages available with a single pay, a 3-year pay, a 5-year pay, and a 10-year pay. So please stop by and talk with us concerning your pre-funeral arrangements needs available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home, and also whole life insurance is available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home.
And now for our announcements. The Friendship Baptist Church of Findlay, Georgia Family and Friends Day service will be observed on Sunday, February the 12th at 11 o'clock a.m. Everyone has a cordial invitation to attend. Sister Inez H. Johnson, Secretary, Reverend Joseph Atkins, Pastor. The Mount Moriah Baptist Church of Unadilla will have the installation service for its pastor, Brother Edward Lester, on Sunday, February the 5th at 2 o'clock p.m. Dinner will be served. Sister Linda Jordan, Mission President, Brother Earl Jordan, Chairman of Deacons, Brother Edward Lester is the pastor. You're cordially invited to worship at the Greater Mars Tabernacle Baptist Church today Sunday school begins at 9 o'clock a.m., worship service at 10 o'clock a.m. You may join them for their conference call beginning at 9 o'clock a.m., Tuesday midday prayer conference at 12 o'clock noon, Thursday prayer meeting and Bible study at 6 o'clock p.m. The call-in number for the conference call is 229-329-7611. 229-329-7611. Deacon Arthur L. Parker, Chairman of Deacons. Reverend Dr. K.M. Williams is the pastor. The Mount Zion First African Baptist Church conference call scheduled Sunday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Prayer Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 12 o'clock noon. Bible study is held each Wednesday at 5 o'clock p.m. The call-in number is 339-209-6419. 339-209-6419. Deacon Joe Wedges is the chairman of deacons. Reverend Dr. Jan James III is the pastor. The New Oak Grove Baptist Church invites everyone to worship with them each Sunday for Sunday school beginning at 9:15 a.m. Worship service is held at 10 o'clock a.m. Face covering is required. Deacon Alonzo Jones is the chairman of deacons. Reverend W.W. Wilson is the pastor. Straight Life Church of God Pentecostal of Cordele Friends and Family Day service will be observed today, Sunday, January 29th, beginning at 9:30 a.m. Everyone has a cordial invitation to attend. Bishop Fred N. Williams is the pastor. The Bethel CME Church Missionaries program will be today beginning at 11 o'clock a.m. Author consultant Mary L. Beal will be the guest speaker. Deacon William O'Durham will be the worship leader. Sister Sue Ellen James, mission president. Pastor A. Anthony Robinson III is the pastor. The Crisp County Cougars class of 78 reunion committee will meet on Saturday, February the 4th at 2 o'clock p.m. at Blackshear Place to discuss plans for the class reunion. Brother Norris Mathis' 16th gospel anniversary will be Sunday, February 26th at the A.S. Clark Medical Institute. On program will be the Gospel Travelers of Oakfield, Georgia, the Gospel Pioneers of Vienna, Georgia, the Gospel Stars of Lilly, Georgia, Blessed and Highly Favored of Warner Robins, Georgia, New Silver Stars of Macon, Georgia, Bubba and the Zioneers. Doors will open at 3 o'clock p.m. The program starts at 4 o'clock p.m. Everyone attending is required to wear a mask. The Crisp County Community Council Daddy-Daughter Dance will be Friday, February 3rd from 7 p.m. until 9 p.m. at First United Methodist Activity Center. Tickets can be purchased at Judy Small World. For more information, please call 229-271-1054. 229-271-1054. Mrs. Linda Faye Marlin will be feeding the homeless every fourth Sunday of each month from 2 until 4 o'clock p.m. For delivery or for more information, please call 229-401-8868. 229-401-8868. The Wilcox Head Start is offering free child development services for eligible families with children ages 3 to 5. For more information, please contact Mrs. Donna Jenkins at 229-365-2341 or 478-922-4464. The Free Will Ushers Union Fellowship will be Sunday, January 29th, this morning, beginning at 11 o'clock a.m. at the Welcome Baptist Church. All ushers, presidents, ushers, and usher union church members are asked to attend. The New Corinth Baptist Church of Hooks Mill Road, Leslie, Georgia, invites everyone to worship with them each third Sunday at 10 o'clock a.m. Reverend Carl Smith is the pastor. The Jerusalem Baptist Church will celebrate the first pastoral anniversary of Dr. Deanne and Reverend Johnny Holsey on Sunday, February 12th at 11 o'clock a.m. Apostle Patrick Holsey of Salvation and Praise Ministries of Albany, Georgia, will be the guest speaker. Dr. Deanne Holsey is the pastor. The McAfee Grove Baptist Church of Leesburg invites everyone to worship with them family nights Tuesday at 7 o'clock p.m., small class study Thursday at 7 p.m., Sunday morning worship at 9 o'clock a.m., and you may join them by calling 425-436-6341. The access code is 708058. Reverend Dr. Robert L. Morgan Sr. is the pastor. The Cordial Christ branch of the NAACP will hold its February meeting on Thursday, February 9th at 6 o'clock p.m. Thursday, February 9th at 6 o'clock p.m. All branch members and anyone interested in becoming a member is asked to attend. Dr. Ruby Jackson, Branch Secretary, Reverend Isaac H. Owens, Branch President. You have a cordial invitation to worship at the Mount Calvary Baptist Church today. Sunday school begins at 9:45 a.m., worship service at 10:30 a.m. Everyone has a cordial invitation to attend. Deacon Leon Spears, Chairman of Deacons, Reverend Isaac Owens is the pastor. Many of you have been asking about the J.W. Williams Funeral Home calendars for the year of 2023. Please stop by the J.W. Williams Funeral Home to pick up your calendar for 2023. Remember, you may come by between any day, Monday through Friday, from 9 until 5 o'clock p.m. to pick up your calendar. 2023 J.W. Williams Funeral Home calendars are available for pickup at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. That concludes our announcements for today.
And now for dedication. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following: in loving memory of Mrs. Jessie Lee Glenn, who departed this life January 16, 2002, and would have celebrated her birthday January 28th, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of Deacon Carl Redding, who departed this life January 26, 2021, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of Mother Bobby Fagan, who would have celebrated her birthday January 27th, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of Mrs. Daisy Jones, who departed this life January 27th, 2008. Precious memory lingers still. In loving memory of Deacon Willie James Glenn, who departed this life January 28th, 2004. Precious memory lingers still. In loving memory of Mother Dewell Easter May Sheffield Byram, who departed this life January 28th, 2022, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of Deacon Dan Colson, who would have celebrated his 71st birthday Saturday, January 28th, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of Mrs. Beatty Adams, who departed this life January 29, 2003. Precious memory lingers still. In loving memory of Mrs. Sheila Jones Harris, who departed this life January 29, 2006, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of Mrs. Sheila Maynard, who departed this life January 29, 1993. Precious memory lingers still. In loving memory of Mrs. Claudine Burden, who departed this life January 30th, 2021, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of Deacon Willie D. Fagan, who would have celebrated his birthday January 31st, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of Mr. Marvin Clark, who would have celebrated his birthday January 31st. Precious memory lingers still. In loving memory of Mrs. Elizabeth Graham, known to all of us as Big Ma, and would have celebrated her birthday February 1st, gone but not forgotten. Our first election this morning is dedicated to the following. Happy anniversary to Mr. Mike and Miss Nancy Evans, who celebrated their anniversary Friday, January 27th. And also happy birthday to Mr. Mike Evans, who celebrated his birthday Saturday, January 28th. Happy anniversary to our friend and Brother Kelvin and Sister Deborah Pless, who celebrated their anniversary during this past Wednesday. God continue to bless each of your unions and keep it strong. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following. Happy birthday to Mr. David Kendrick Sr. of McDonough, Georgia, who celebrated his birthday Saturday, January 31st. Happy birthday to Miss Sherry Harris of Albany, Georgia, who celebrated her birthday Sunday, January 22nd. Happy birthday to Deacon Henry King of the Gethsemane Baptist Church, who celebrated his birthday Friday, January 27th. Happy birthday, special birthday wishes goes out to Mother Leela May Honey Smith, who will celebrate her 103rd birthday Saturday, February 4th, with a drive-by celebration from 12 until 3 p.m. at her home. Dedication requested by the entire Smith family and the Zion Hope Baptist Church of Winona, Georgia, where she serves as mother of the church. Happy birthday to Mother Leela May Honey Smith. And I thought we had a picture. Her 103rd birthday, Saturday, February 4th, with a drive-by celebration from 12 until 3 p.m. at her home. God bless you, 103 years old. Happy birthday to Mother Ora Morris, who celebrated her birthday recently. Dedication requested by the Morris family. A special birthday wish goes out our friend and Brother Michael Kinder of Americus, Georgia. It is certainly with the deepest regret that we make the following announcements. Deacon Ransom Briggs, age 84, 350 Hobbs and Bridge Road, Buena Vista, Georgia, died Wednesday, January 18th at Atrium Navison Health in Macon, Georgia. The funeral service for Deacon Ransom Briggs, age 84, will be held Tuesday, January 31st at 11 a.m. in the sanctuary of the Nazarene Church of God in Christ in Buena Vista, Georgia. The burial will follow at the Hobbs Briggs Family Cemetery in Buena Vista, Georgia. The public visitation will be Monday, January 30th from 1 until 6 p.m. in the sanctuary of the Nazarene Church of God in Christ in Buena Vista, Georgia. Mr. Lonnie Charles Felton, better known as Shine, age 66, of 823 T.E. Mooney Street, Montezuma, Georgia, died Monday, January 23rd at his residence in Montezuma, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Lonnie Charles Felton, better known as Shine, age 66, will be held Saturday, February 4th at 10 a.m. in the sanctuary of the Turkey Creek Baptist Church in Lilly, Georgia. The burial will follow at the Vienna City Cemetery in Vienna, Georgia. The public visitation will be Friday, February 3rd from 1 until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Mr. Daniel Cornelius Sharper Woods, age 31, of 129 South Dudley Street, Americus, Georgia, died Thursday, January 26th at the St. Francis Hospital in Columbus, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Daniel Cornelius Sharper Woods, age 31, will be held Sunday, February 5th at 11 a.m. graveside at Eastview Cemetery in Americus, Georgia. The public visitation will be Saturday, February 4th from 1 until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Beloved musician, Brother Dwayne Alexander Sonder, age 45, of 201 South 12th Street, Cordele, Georgia, died Sunday, January 22nd, at the home of his beloved daughter in Newberry, South Carolina. The funeral service for beloved musician Brother Dwayne Alexander Sumner, age 45, will be announced at a later date pending the completion of the arrangements. Mr. Calvin B. Johnson Sr., better known as Peanut, age 40, of 1206 East Blue Lane, Cordele, Georgia, died Thursday, January 26, at the Chris Regional Nursing and Rehabilitation Center in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Calvin B. Johnson, better known as Peanut, age 40, will be announced at a later date pending the completion of the arrangements. Miss Jacqueline Power, age 58, of 2124 South Highway 41, Cordele, Georgia, died Thursday, January 26, at her residence in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Miss Jacqueline Power, age 58, will be announced at a later date pending the completion of the arrangements. Mr. Willie James Dawson Jr., age 66, of 2002 South 7th Street, Cordele, Georgia, died Friday, January 27, at the Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Willie James Dawson Jr., age 66, will be announced at a later date pending the completion of the arrangements. The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors serving Cordele and Diana are in charge of each of these arrangements during this week. Our next and final selection for this morning is dedicated to the bereaved families whose loved ones were laid to rest during the past week. The family of United States Army veteran Mr. Danny Williamson of Cordele, Georgia, the family of Ms. Vera Mae Carter of Cordele, Georgia, the family of Mr. Sammy Lee Bridges Sr. of Americus, Georgia, the family of Mr. Joseph Williams Jr. of Vienna, Georgia, the family of United States Army veteran Mrs. Doris Jean Jones McBurst of Pitts, Georgia. This election is dedicated to the bereaved families whose loved ones will be laid to rest during this week. The family of Deacon Ransom Briggs of Buena Vista, Georgia,